blind men sitting by the road, hearing that Jesus was passing by, cried out, saying, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. And the multitude sternly told them to be quiet. But they cried out all the more, saying, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. And Jesus stopped and called them and said, What do you want me to do for you? And they said to him, Lord, we want our eyes to be opened. And moved with compassion, Jesus touched their eyes, and immediately they regained their sight and followed him.
One of the things that we take a look at is that even though Christ loved people and had compassion for people, he didn't always heal those folks. And one person that comes to mind is John the Baptist. John the Baptist was actually his own cousin. So Jesus didn't go and save him from being killed. He allowed to have what transpired transpire. Again, the things that Jesus did, why did Jesus do these miracles? To confirm the word, to confirm that he is the Christ. So, and that the things that he's doing, the things that he's saying, comes from God. So we can't lose track of that, because a lot of people today want to think that Jesus saved people just to save people, just to save people. And we find that, he did do a lot of miracles to restore sight. He brought people back from the death, but he didn't do that for everybody. And we need to be cognizant of that, especially as we go through our own lives, and there are things that we pray for to God and ask for from God. Sometimes it's no. Sometimes it's no. And we go through, and I know that Garth Brooks had a song out years ago that said unanswered prayers. And that's not a good song. Because God answers all of our prayers. Answers all of them. Sometimes it's no, sometimes it's wait, sometimes it's yes, but maybe not right now. But God knows what's best for us, and he gives us the things that we need and that are most needful for us. So just kind of looking at this miracle here, he did have compassion on this man. And what city was he in when he did this? Jericho. And we've heard of Jericho before. Where have we heard Jericho at?
Came tumbling down.
Yeah, there's a nice little kid's song about that gets sung a lot. And I think there's some other songs that talk about Jericho that have been sung. Is this the same Jericho? And I know that's one of the questions, but is this the same Jericho that we find in the Old Testament? Joyce?
I found in one of my books that it was rebuilt. It had been destroyed, but it was rebuilt by Herod the Great in the Judean desert, not far from the Jordan River.
All right, but is it Jericho? The city named Jericho got rebuilt, but is it at the same site as the other Jericho? Okay. Some of the commentaries that I have found, that it was located southeast of the one that had been destroyed. So it probably wasn't too far from there, but it wasn't actually on the same location. And we find that with a lot of different cities that may have been destroyed, that have had been covered up, and people came back and started a city maybe located near there, and named the city the same city that had been destroyed. So tell us about this account of Bartimaeus here. Was it just Bartimaeus that was there?
But I read there were two blind men.
Okay. In what? In a big crowd. So there were a lot of people around. So, I mean, this wasn't a miracle that Jesus did, kind of hidden away. I mean, it was out there for everybody to see. And again, if you're wanting to confirm the word, if you're wanting people to understand that the things that you are saying is from God, I mean, you want it to be seen. We sing that song about not hiding your candle, not putting it out or putting a basket over it. And so Jesus does this way out in the open so everybody can see. What else do we find here? What did they ask Jesus to begin with? To have mercy on us. So they really didn't necessarily say, "Hey, fix my eyesight." They wanted Christ to bless them or have mercy on them, and maybe that's what was on their mind when they said this. But but Jesus did say, "How do you want me to how do you want me to do this?" Or what do you want me to do? Because I think they just said, "Have mercy on us." And so what did they ask Christ to do?
We want to see.
We want our sight back. How is this different from earlier blindings that had been healed? How did Jesus heal some of the blind before this? Spit, right? Spit in the dirt, made some mud, and put it on the guy's eyes. Another guy, he told him, where did he tell him to wash his eyes? Did he do the same thing here? No. So, evidently, it wasn't just spitting on mud and putting it on people's eyes and have them wash a certain place in order for them to have their eyesight restored. These guys' eyesight was restored how? When he spoke, right? It was immediate. It wasn't that you have to do this and go do that. And maybe these guys had much more faith. They did not need to demonstrate their faith by going to that pool. Kind of like Naaman, when Naaman wanted to be healed of leprosy. And what was Naaman told to go do? Dip 7 times in the Jordan. And so was he glad to just go do that? No. I mean, leprosy is a terrible disease. And he was mad that he had to go to the Jordan and dip 7 times. And yet, his messenger told him, if this guy had told you to go do some great thing, would you have done that? Well, yeah. Okay. So what's the big deal of going to the Jordan River and dipping 7 times? So it was an act of obedience that Naaman needed to go do. And I think with the guy in the pool of Siloam, he had to demonstrate that he was willing to go and do and follow the word that was being said. Evidently, maybe this guy didn't have to have that. He by this time, Jesus was really well known. And evidently this man had great faith. So Jesus just touched their eyes. So let's take a look at the questions then. Number 5. where was Jesus when the miracle occurred, and is it the same city? I know that we answered that question. And in this Jericho, it was rich. It flourished at that time. So, I mean, when you see a lot of people there, I mean, it's like people here wanting to go to Greenwood or Indianapolis to go shopping. Because, I mean, you got all the stuff there, you got a lot of stores, and, you know, if you go up there Thanksgiving, Christmas time, I mean, it's a madhouse because everybody's there. It's hustle, it's bustle, and that's kind of how this city was here, Jericho. So how did Bartimaeus address Jesus, and what did he request? Okay.
Didn't hush till Jesus had addressed him.
Okay. Anyone else? One of the things that I was taking a look at is that he called Jesus Lord. And that's not just, I think that's more of a sign of royalty, of someone being king. And I think that's the respectful title that Jesus owns, that it is due him. And Bartimaeus addressed him as this. And perhaps this showed his faith and his faith in Jesus and what he believed Jesus to be, whereas earlier in Jesus' ministry, the guy that had his eyes restored there at the pool of Siloam, he may not have known who Jesus was. Evidently, this man did know. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, because they knew Jesus was coming, and so like you said, I think they knew who he was and what he could do.
Well, and he kind of, and when you take a look at the three different instances, one says that it was when they were leaving that they met him, and they may have known where he was coming out with the crowd and stuff. They, unlike Zacchaeus, knowing where the route was going to be and got up in a tree so he could see him before he got there as he was coming. These guys went to the gate where they figured he was going to go through and come out. And so, again, you know, at this time, you know, we see in many of the instances that people, when they knew that Christ was going to be someplace, they brought their sick, they brought different things. So Jesus was, again, really well known at this time.
The fact that he addresses him as son of David means he recognized him as the Messiah. And that was a term that the Jews understood to be a reference to the Christ. So, I mean, that particular name that he gives to Jesus is unique to a single individual that the Jews were looking forward to coming. And so it recognizes in some ways even a greater thing than just addressing him. If he was addressing him respectfully as Lord, calling him the son of David says, I believe you're the Messiah. And so it shows a great deal of faith in who he believed Jesus to be.
Okay. Yes, Audrey?
I think what's one of the things that you get out of this these verses is that Bartimaeus was very determined. I mean, they tried to say, be quiet, you know, but he persevered, and he felt like his situation was, well, he obviously none of us would like to lose our sight, and so he didn't have any, and so he persevered and said, it didn't matter that they were telling him to be quiet. He said to himself he was going to have Jesus to perform a miracle because he had faith. He knew he could.
And so that's a very good point. Determination. And how determined are we to get to heaven? How determined are we to want to be with God? You know, we know where Jesus is going to be at. And we know that at the end of our life we're going to meet up with Jesus. But are we going to be prepared for that, Jim?
Yeah, I was going to point out, you notice these miracles, it said immediately. He didn't say wait 6 months and come back. Immediately they were healed.
Yeah, and that kind of, when some of these faith healers, so-called faith healers are out there and stuff that are charlatans really, and when they don't work, they want to say, well, this person didn't have the faith. And here we find that Jesus could take care of that. John?
You know, when it talks about he followed him, and here's this guy who, even though he's blind, he's seeing more clearly than maybe even the disciples are. Because you look at the previous 2 chapters, you know, and they're arguing about greatness and all that stuff. And then here you have these folks, and they're seeing clearly even though they're blind. The Lord says, the Lord heals them. And then they followed him. And you think about what they would see with their new given vision. And we're within a week of the cross. And to just think about that immense test of faith. Here's someone who has power that nobody else has. And as they follow him into Jerusalem, they're going to see him voluntarily go to the cross. And, you know, to think about what people say, he saved others, can't he save himself? Yes, he could. And no, he's not going to. And it's just an amazing thing to think about what they would see as they followed him.
So when we finishing up on the determination, I mean, I think that's a good question that we have to ask ourselves. We see that the blind man here wanted his sight back so bad. He was willing to not shut up. He was willing to go where he could to get to Jesus. And are we that determined today to see Jesus and to be blessed by Jesus? And that's a good question that we have to ask. Again, when we go back to the rich young ruler, so all that you have, follow me. That was a stumbling block for him. His riches were. And, you know, what's in our way, and are we determined enough to go through those obstacles or remove those obstacles so that we can follow Jesus and that we can meet with Jesus and be with Jesus. Like I said, we know where Jesus is at. We know that we're going to meet him when our days are done here on this earth. And so is it going to be a joyful one where we'll be blessed or not? So just a thought, and I'm glad that Audra brought that up. So what did Jesus say to make him well, for question number 7? I can't hear you.
Faith.
His faith. They said unto him, receive thy sight, thy faith has saved thee. So here again we see that he did have faith, that his faith was great, and it was that faith, I believe, again, that he was determined. I mean, you know, if we could see how blind that we are, if we could see how maybe diseased we are with, you know, maybe some of the sin. I mean, I would even like to sit with Christ sometime and say, ask that question that the rich young ruler said, what is it that I need to do? Because I think sometimes we are so blind at some of the things that we do, some of the things that we need to do better, or things that maybe we're not doing that we should do. And it would be nice it would be nice for Jesus to say, you need to go do this. Just like maybe your boss, you go to your boss and say, what do I need to improve? What do I need to do to get to that next step? And, you know, you may not like what you hear, but if you want to advance, those are some of the things that you need to do and to hear. But we do have the scriptures. The scriptures does tell us what we need to do. And so we do need to open our eyes to the scriptures more. And that's all of us. All of us need to do that.
I'm going to put a plug in for the bulletin, and John has an article about that, examining ourselves, and kind of, you know, it's got a story about this boy. You know, he wants to better himself, and so he asks, you know, what am I lacking? You know, am I doing anything wrong? Do I need to, you know, where am I weak in?
And again, you know, we could try to examine ourselves, and we should examine ourselves, but many times we're blind to those things, or we hide them from ourselves. I mean, there's a lot of times as an engineer, I send out things to customers, and there's a lot of times that I'll say, okay, I'll have somebody else read it. How does this read? Does it read right? And because some of the letters may not be, you know, hey, great job, glad we could do this. Some of it could be saying, hey, you know, your product's not meeting standards, or a lot of times our customers automatically blame the supplier, and so we have to respond to that. And I want to make sure that the wording that I'm sending back isn't hostile or whatever. But you know, we can read our own writing after we write it, and there might be some words missing, but our mind will automatically put those words in there. And so it's always best, I've found, for someone to read what I've written so that they can say, okay, I really don't understand what you're saying here. So that way I can make it better. So again, when we take a look at our own lives, a lot of times, you know, our mind will fill in those blanks. We'll fill in those words that we've got missing out. And so sometimes it's good for others to get input from others. Anything on this healing here that you may want to bring out? She's up here, Jim. Okay, so let's go on to Zacchaeus. And if somebody would, this is in Luke 19, if somebody would read Luke 19, verses 1 through 10. Anybody who's got it?
He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, He has gone to be the guest of a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, Lord, look, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost.
All right, this is thank you. This is a story that we talk to kids about. I think there's even a little song about Zacchaeus and stuff. And I think the reason why we sing it with little kids, and this is such a good story, it's because this guy's a small guy. And even small, people that aren't very tall can have faith, can do a lot of things. And so, what about Zacchaeus here? Did he have determination? Yes, he did. And what shows that determination? I mean, was he around the crowds where Jesus was? Wasn't that good enough?
Well, to me, it speaks of him being wealthy, for one thing, and for him to climb a tree. I'm sorry, a wealthy man climbing a tree. It just, you don't think of that. But I think he was, he was determined. I'm not sure, tax collectors were looked down as lowly, and he was one of these chief, it sounded like he had pretty good money. What in his mind, he heard of Jesus, so apparently his heart was touched by that message.
And you would have thought that being rich, he could have hired someone to get him lifted up higher, don't you think? Or maybe, people who are wealthy, don't they get the better seats? Yeah, he could have had some bouncers to just spread the people so he could get up there. But, there are a lot of different things that you would think being rich that, this guy could have had a prominent spot, you would have thought, having the money to be able to get up there. But either his money didn't mean stuff to people because they wanted to see Christ, or, he didn't, he didn't think that.
And he, because of his size, he knew what, as the crowd moved along with Jesus, that it was going to be difficult for him. So, anticipating what was going to happen, and his stature, he climbs his tree ahead of time. So as Jesus passes through, he's already got a chief seat.
Oh, yeah. And so, you talk about going ahead of time, when you think about parades or some of the, I know Columbus here, for Memorial Day, they have a free concert out there. What do people do to get a good spot? Early to me is like getting there a half hour or an hour before something starts. But there's people who are actually camped out there a day or so before so that they have that specific spot. And I don't know how much money that person might be tempted with to give those spots up. However, if people want to see something, they're willing to get there early. And I don't know that this happens too much on Thanksgiving anymore, but used to for Black Friday or whatever. There were people out there Thanksgiving Day camping out to be first in line, or close to being first in line there at stores, even here in Columbus. And I don't know that happens anymore, but determination. If there's something that you want bad enough, what are you willing to do? And Zacchaeus here evidently knew what the route was, and he did want to see Jesus, and that's specifically what he wanted to do, was just to see Jesus. He wanted to have that eyesight.
Wealthy and all that, and how he could have maybe had prominence or whatever, but I get the impression that he didn't use his wealth in that way, because later on it says that he had given half to the poor, and so I just wonder if
Well, I think Chuck hit the important part. What else was he? What was his occupation?
he was a tax collector.
They were not looked on very well by the crowd. I think being a tax collector is worse than being a politician. So,
Zacchaeus had to take that step of, I'm tired of the life I'm living. I'm tired of the way that, I've treated other people. He's already made the determination to make amends for some of his crimes against his fellow citizens. And so we're seeing a man in the process of a changed life. And that's what the Messiah, that's why Jesus came to the earth. And so many of the people he talked to, they didn't have that experience that Zacchaeus was having. I think the focus here is on looking at the transition of someone who has not given regard to other people, and now he finds other people's well-being is important to him. And he finds getting a relationship with God has become important to him. And so this is a transitioning life that we are witnessing. And that's pretty amazing.
And I think that's something that Jesus noticed about Zacchaeus, because have Jesus ever met Zacchaeus before? But he knows who his name is. I mean, he's God, so I mean, of course he knows all of our names, but he knew who Zacchaeus was. I mean, no name badge was there. Jim?
Yeah, there's people that teach us that the individual is no different than the church. The church and individuals the same. I wonder if Zacchaeus was a local church. That'd be a good passage to use on him. He wasn't a local church. He's an individual.
Yeah,
Individuals is not the collective, you see.
Right. Was there someone else that had a comment? Okay, so what does Jesus want to do with Zacchaeus? He notices him up in the tree, which, he had to have had that out of, miraculously know that someone's up there, because I would think with the big crowds around, your eyesight's more going to be focused on the crowds and not up in the sky or in the trees. So what does Jesus tell Zacchaeus then when he sees him? And he calls him out by name. Says come on down, I'm going to your house for dinner. What do you think Zacchaeus' wife's going to say? Probably kill him, won't it? No. But isn't that kind of bold for someone to, with Greg here being a state senator, you think maybe he goes out in the crowds and he just picks somebody out and says, let's go, we're going to your house for dinner. What do you think that's going to look like, Greg? So, Jesus has an interest in Zacchaeus, doesn't he? And so they do go to his house. And again, as Greg pointed out, okay, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, of everything the Lord does is intentional. And, with Bartimaeus, well, it's obvious what the problem is. The guy's blind. I don't know how long he was blind, but it's obvious. The Lord knew exactly what he was doing when he chose Zacchaeus, because the next verse is the people complain. He's going to eat. He has gone to be a guest with a man who is a sinner. And it's to think about Jesus as the great physician. Sometimes the problem is obvious, like the blind man. Other times the problem has to come to the surface. And the Lord has a distinct knack for bringing the problem to the surface so he can address it. As long as things are hidden, we can't get to it, but we're going to bring it to the surface. Okay, so how are we going to bring these people's hard hearts to the surface? Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house. And he knows exactly the attitude that so many people are going to have. And that's what he's going to end up addressing later on in the passage.
Okay, so being a doctor, does the doctor go and visit well people? Do well people go to a doctor's office and say, hey, give me a checkup? Other than we have physicals, but No, the doctors work on people who are ill, who need their help. And so that's what Jesus is looking for. I mean, you come to seek and save the lost. You don't come and to seek those who are already saved. Mary? Chuck's on his way.
Moses, so they are Israelites,
Yes, they are.
and the law of Christ did not go into effect until after the cross.
That's right.
The sacrifice was made for Israel, and God included the Gentiles if they would believe.
So yeah, I mean that Jesus's aim was to seek and save the lost, which at first was the house of Israel, and then it was first the Jews, and then it included the Gentiles, and that is exactly right. So I mean, he was seeking all of his children. Jim?
Jesus said on one occasion that told the Pharisees, said the publicans and the harlots will go into the kingdom of God before you. It seemed to me like this was a publican here would had a heart would take him into the kingdom when he came.
Absolutely. So we talked about the rich young ruler and what some of his obstacles was. Greg pointed out what this rich tax collector was willing to do. Did Jesus have to tell him, hey, go give to the poor and follow me? This guy already knew what he needed to do. Jim?
You know, whatever you defrauded them plus a fifth more. And he's saying, hey, I'm going to do it 4 times as much. So he's going to make sure that he not only repays it, but he repays it at least what the law says or more.
Right. So Zacchaeus here, he's had a real change of heart of what he wanted to do. We take a look at, again, the Pharisees. They're condemning Christ because he's again eating with sinners. He's again mingling with someone that they considered a sinner. And as Mary pointed out, these are all Israelites. Zacchaeus is not a Gentile. He's an Israelite. And so, isn't this something that maybe the Pharisees should have addressed long before Jesus even got here? If they considered him a sinner? Maybe they did, I don't know. But still, it seems like they were pretty tolerant of that going on with other Israelites. I guess we'll cover this in the questions. So question number 8 says, how does the text describe Zacchaeus and what is his occupation? Okay, short in stature, a tax collector. And how eager is Zacchaeus to see Jesus?
I'm a tree.
Enough to go ahead of the crowd and in where the route was going to be. I mean, isn't that pretty determined? What did the people say about Jesus going to Zacchaeus' house?
You do that. They're sinners, and they're
Right. Okay, and so what did Zacchaeus do with his wealth, and what would he do if he had taken anything by false accusation? And the ESV said defrauded anyone. Anybody? Okay? Yes. I mean, Jesus actually told him, that's the rich young ruler, this is what you need to do. Jesus didn't tell Zacchaeus, this is what you need to do. Zacchaeus was ahead of the game. He seemed to know what he needed to do, and he was willing to make that change. Okay, so the question is, and I think this is a pretty significant question here. What is the significance of being a son of Abraham, as Jesus called Zacchaeus? I think that's significant, just like with being called the son of David. So what does it mean to be the son of Abraham? So, go ahead and hit the answers up there. So, again, and I think Audra's right, it's talking about the faith of Abraham. Abraham, when Jesus told him to go do something, Abraham got up and went. He came to a land that he knew nothing about, didn't know anything about the people, but God told him to pick up and go, and he went. And if you take a look in Galatians 3, in verses 7 through 9, it talks, know ye therefore that they that are of faith, the same are the children of Abraham. So I think that's what he's saying to Zacchaeus, because he had that faith. He was willing to bulldoze down those obstacles of money and riches, and willing to do what it needed to be done to be with Jesus. So we'll be ready for question 13, and then we'll get into the parable of the pounds. Thank you so much for your comments and participation.